Ah, all right. All right. Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi Brachas Perek Shlishi Halacha Aleph in the Oiz V'Hadar's edition Daf Lamed Gimel. We left off on Daf Lamed Beis, Amid Beis, 5 lines before the bottom of the Amid. The Gemara began the discussion as to when does Aninus end, thus when does Avelus begin. We had a Machlokes Tanoim, and the example of the Minhagim or the Dinim that one has to engage in Dafka when Avelus begins, not during Aninus. One of the many is Kfiyas Hamitois, Koifenes Hamitois, the turning over of the beds. By the way, when we learned in Bavli and Moed Katan, Tosfos gives 2 reasons why the Poyel Mamish nowadays, the Avel is not going to overturn all of the beds in the house. The first reason Tosfos gives is because the Goyim that observe it might accuse us of practicing in witchcraft. It looks like Kishuv. And evidently, there was a time where this was probably a Pikuach Nefesh. If Yidden would be accused of being witches, you're Jewish and you're a witch. And then Tosfos also writes that the types of beds that they had then versus the beds that we have now, means then by Chazal, now by Tosfos, is such that overturning the beds won't even be that effective. It seems like in the times of Tosfos, the beds that had 4 legs underneath it, those legs went above it as well. That's the way and different. When you turn it over, the bed or the mattress won't even be that much closer to the ground. You understand? It's just, it's like one of those things that no matter which way you turn it, they flip the flame. They flip it. So it wasn't helpful. Yeah, if people, no one slept on the floor with a mattress, and if you did that, it wouldn't help. There's nothing to turn over. Yeah. Anyways, bottom line is just to be aware that we don't do kaifin asamitos, but that's one of the dinim of an oval bisman chazal, and from there we're going to go into the rule that an oinen may not eat in the presence of the corpse of the body. Really, as we will learn, it's not only a din on the oinen, it's a din for anyone. We're not allowed to eat in the presence of a corpse. It has to do with loyeg l'rosh, as we'll speak out. The Gemara is going to give an example where the time of Aninus ends earlier than the times that we're going to start today's sugya out that we finished yesterday's daf. And right, Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yeshua, Misha Yetze Hameis Mi Pesach HaChatzer, Misha Yesosem HaGoylel. There are times that Aninus ends earlier, and if we'll have time, we'll start the sugya pertaining to the consumption of meat and of wine, dafke by the oval. There were times, as we'll learn, that an oval would drink 10 cups of wine. Can you imagine? We will learn a little bit about the su'udas havra'ah. The word havra'ah either means the meal which will help you get healthier, or it means a small meal. And the din is that when the avelim return from the kavura, the first meal that they eat, which is called su'udas havra'ah, is food that they don't make from their own, dafka made by others. The most basic reason that the Rishonim explain is that when a person is in that state of mourning, they can lose their appetite, and they need to have someone else, so to say, inspiring them to eat. So other people bring them food. We're going to learn about the certain types of foods that they would eat during the Su'udas Havra'ah. We will learn that some Amoraim actually fasted if they were an Avel on the day of the Kavura when they entered into Avelos, and much more. Again, we are dedicating this class for the miraculous return of all of our hostages, for the Hatzlacha of the IDF, and for all of the Jewish people. Amen. So Daf Lamed Beis, Amid Beis, we're going to begin where we left off. Again, we are in the middle of a Braisa. Machlokes Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua. From when are you koifen as hamitois? Rabbi Eliezer holds that Aninus ends earlier, right? When they take the body outside the courtyard, this is way before, on the way to burial. That's when the Aninus ends, which means that's when the Avelu starts, which means, as an example, one of the many things, koifen as hamitas, other things will be, for example, you have to remove your shoes. That's not something that an oinen has to do. He can go with leather shoes. She can go with leather shoes, but not when a person is in avelus. V'chulei. And Rabbi Yeshua holds no, only from Stimas Hagoylel. And we ended off yesterday by reviewing the Machlokes and Bavli between Rashi and the Rabbeinu Tam, and we paskin like the Rabbeinu Tam that only when the tombstone is placed, even though it's a very temporary tombstone, right, Kevan? Those are the stones you asked, the stones that we placed on top, and that's something that we actually find. Bashgacha Pratzos, we're coming right off the yard site of Rabbeinu. In the Torah, we have Yaakov Avinu's building of a matzeva for Rachel Imenu. There's really a machlokes for whom do we build the matzeva, whether it is for the dead, whether it is for the living. We're not going to go into that right now. Point is that we leave a permanent mark on top of the remains of a person. And that's why we have to place stone, because from the physical things that we have, that which changes the slowest, let's say, is a stone, right? Engraved in stone. Actually, we engrave on the stone, not write on the stone, but dafka engrave on the stone, something regarding who is buried in that location. Okay. So anyways, closing this tombstone is from when? That's where we left off. That Shitas Rabbi Yeshua. Now the Gemara says, the Braisa says a story that Ochshemes, the great Rabbi Gamliel himself, when his remains was taken out of the Chatzar towards his burial, Amar Rabbi Eliezer leTalmidov, they were standing up for the opinion of their Rebbe, of Rabbi Eliezer. And what did they tell their Talmidov? Kfuas Amitois, which is another detail. They didn't tell it to his children. They told it to his students. That's because Rabbi Gamliel was the Nasi. And when the Nasi passes away, everyone is obligated to have some moment, half an hour. There's a certain small period of time that everyone has to become a novel. People have to rip kriya. People have to sit on the ground. They have to be noigdinig avelos. By the way, another thing just to remember, that it was Rabbi Gamliel's greatness that he was the one that insisted for him to be buried in the most simplest way possible. They used to make tachrichen out of silk. Remember that? They used to have coffins that were expensive, right? And it became so expensive to bury that when people lost relatives, they couldn't afford to bury. They would put the corpse in front of the basin and run away. Rabbi Gamliel went ahead and he insisted that he should be buried with the cheapest of shrouds. And that's his merit. Yeah. I just want to add one more detail, that the tragedy of now is that even though the shrouds are the cheapest, but over the years we figured out how to make a death cost a lot of money. If a person passes away, even the cheap day. So what? I don't know. I don't know the solution for that. I do say that here, Chabad of California is amazing. That compared to the other Beis HaChaims, that here, how many mess mitzvahs were we involved in? Here you can bury a person with the matzeva, with the tahara for $5,000. Don't repeat that. I know we're on live. That's the mamish the cost, because Chabad already owns the Beis HaChaim. So when you have Eden, that you have to fight with the families not to make cremation, and they claim that they're poor, and you have to raise the money from the community to do the burial. So that's amazing. But a normal burial here must cost $30,000 between the plot or something like that. It costed. So, anyways, so that was what happened. Now, so the Talmidim of Rabbi Eliezer himself told the Talmidim to turn over their beds. Evidently, they listened to that. Now, once they finished the burial, and let's go with the Rabbeinu Tam, when the tombstone was sealed, right, when the burial ended, when they put the stones on top of the burial site, Amar Rabbi Yeshua kfuas amitos. So Amar, they told Rabbi Yeshua, there's no need to do that anymore. That kfar kifinum, we already overturned them. Alpi hazaken, beautiful compliment that they gave to Rabbi Eliezer, right? They called him, that's a compliment. And that's a big thing. That's a big thing. If all of us, we should become familiarized with Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Yeshua was, if not for the fact that Rabbi Gamliel was demoted because of he started up with Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Yeshua would have been the Nasi before they ultimately appointed Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. And Rabbi Eliezer, on the other hand, is called Shamuti. He followed the opinion of Beis Shammai. Shamuti was put into a Chedim. So you would think that Rabbi Eliezer's opinion had no effect. It had the biggest effect. They listened to it. Okay. So now continue. Now turning to we're starting to Daf Lamed Gimel. Top of the Amid. We're going to continue now with the Brais. Says the Brais that the Erev Shabbos Uzoikeves Mitosoi, that Kfiyas Hamita is not only something that is done when Avelus begins, But as we know that we are at least not noyig the avelus befaresia b'Shabbos, which is, by the way we pass it means we don't have tashma shamita. That's betzina, but everything that's of a public nature, we have to, we put on normal clothing. We behave normally, not like an oven. What about the beds? So that was the whole thing. You might have thought that since the bed is in one's home, no one sees it. It's not your bed that you overturn. All of the beds in the home was overturned. That's already called in public. And therefore, in Erev Shabbos, we just don't know the din, no one should know this, around 2.5 hours before Shabbos. If a novel asks a Rav, okay, when can I take a shower? When can I take off my torn clothing? They'll tell them around. Now, if people need more time, that's fine. But that's normally the amount of time that people need before Shabbos to get ready for Shabbos. So in Erev Shabbos, you turn it upright because of Bifaresia. It's called Bifaresia. And by the way, we learned in the previous chapter, right? Really, it's a machlokes tanoim. Some hold that there is no avelus altogether on Shabbos, right? Rab Meir. Avada, you have to turn it up. But a lakula alma, you put the beds back to normal. But a matzoi Shabbos, ukayfen, after Shabbos, you right away have to turn them upside down. Okay. Now we're going to go into some prati dinim about this kfiyas hamitzvos. And again, just to reiterate that, as we quoted from the Tosfos and Moed Katan, that nowadays we don't do kfiyas hamitzvos. Says the Gemara, Tani Bilant in the Brais. Dargosh is a unique type of bed. A dargosh, not only is it a smaller type of bed, most importantly, it had in it a leather sheet that was like the mattress. Other beds, guys, they had a bed frame. This is basically, you have a bed frame, a normal bed, they would take rope and they would go back and forth, both vertically and horizontally, both width and length. And then that's how they would create what we would call the box spring, ropes that are going back and forth. And then on top of the rope, they would put their straw mattress. A dargish was actually something where you had a bed frame, but on the bed frame, you had a tight leather that was bound to the frame. We're going to get details in a moment. And people slept on the dargish. They slept on the leather. On leather. Did I say leather? It's a leather sheet. The challenge with the dargish is that the floors then were not like today. The floors were earthen floors. They were damp. If you were to turn the dargish upside down, putting the place where you sleep on the ground, it could get ruined. So they did not turn the dargish upside down. They couldn't leave the dargish normal because there was then the dinners, and Oval has to turn all of the beds. So what they did was niskefes. They turned it in a vertical position. In other words, if this is the bed, they went like this. So it laid on the legs, on the two legs of the side. No one obviously was not functional. The other beds were functional. You turned it upside down and you laid on the bed. The bed became closer to the ground when they would turn it upside down. Kevin brought a field picture. If you can, whoever's looking at the Zoom, that is to explain the second thing we quoted from Tosfos, why we don't do it at all. Because the beds are made in a way, the picture that he shows, that if you were to turn the bed upside down, today we have coils, metal coils. They would be even higher because the beds have 4 legs that they go up and down. You understand? Anyways, it's hard to pick. If you have the picture, you have the picture. It doesn't matter. Dargish niskefes, but the ein nichbeis, but it should not be overturned. However, Reb Shimon Elazar holds. Well, hold on. The reason why you're telling me not to turn it upside down is because you don't want to ruin. That's the way we're going to learn pshat. You don't want to learn the leather. I have a better solution. Instead of you putting it to the side, what you do is shoymei kal binted in shalom. You remove its straps. The straps is that which holds the sheet, the leather sheet, to the posts, which means that the whole sheet will fall down. And a chanami, it's going to fall on the ground. But what part will fall on the ground? Not the part that you slept on. And according to the types of leathers that they would use, that doesn't matter if it would get damp. You're not going to ruin it. In other words, if I'm sleeping on this side and I turn it upside down, I don't want this side to get wet. But if I'm just removing the straps on the side and the middle, the sheet falls to the ground, even though the bottom of the sheet is laying on the ground, it's not going to get ruined. And vidayoi, and actually, it's considered something easier. It's considered something easier. You know, you think about it. You have a house, you have something turned to the side. Like it's a balagan. It's a balagan enough to turn over your beds. At least it's half organized. It's overturned properly. It's considered a leniency. And we pass like it. Rabbi Yosef Shem Levi says, Rav Shimon Loza, it's viewed as a kula. Instead of having your bed like this, you understand, vertically. Just remove it and loosen it and have that go to the ground. Now, Rabbi Yaakov bar Acha b'shem Rabbi Yosef. I'll tell you why in a moment. We're going to quote a pasuk in Iyuv. And okay, very good. This is certainly related to the fact that we sit in a low chair, because when they would turn the beds upside down, like we mentioned from place, was the goal. The goal was to get the mattress lower to the ground, and they wouldn't only sleep on the beds; they would sit on their beds, they would eat on their beds. Yeah, and all of that is from a pasuk in Iyuv. We'll get to the pasuk soon. So if you have a bed, it was another common thing that they would have a type of canopy. We have this a lot of Masechta Sukkos. So they would have a vertical pole that would be in the Rosh, another vertical pole that would be by the legs. And then you would have a pole that goes on the top of it. And you would have a sheet or something that would prevent bugs from coming in the area where you're sleeping. That would go like a teepee to the sides, just removing that, Shamtan Vidayo, just removing the posts, even though you're not overturning the bed over there. Even though you're not overturning the bed. In other words, you're changing the bed. You're not allowing the bed to be used the way it's normally used. That's enough. Now, coming back to this dinner that we had on the Braisa, about a mita and a dargosh, we just want to clarify. Ezoi mita ve'ezoi dargosh. So Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah, kol shemisorgen al gufa. And that's key, not about, yes, we said correct, it's about the leather versus rope. But that's not the criteria. How do we define a mita? When you have the bedpost, guys, envision this. And you have, like we mentioned, the ropes that are ultimately going to be going all the way to the width, from one side to the other, and then again from the length, one side to the other. Where are you placing those ropes? So if you're rolling it over the bedposts, over the sides, that's called the mita. The mita is such that the ropes that is creating what we would call the mattress area is not going through the bedposts. It's going around it, over and under it, around it. So ultimately, when you end up weaving the bed back and forth, for people who have pictures, the picture is not good for what the Gemara is going to say. It's not good enough. I know. Is that you actually have the bedposts covered with rope. That was the mita. However, if the ropes are not going over the bedpost, over the frame, it's going through the frame. It's going inside through the frame. That is what we will call the dargosh. It's not ropes. It's not ropes because they would have much smaller ropes. There's another fact. We have this before, Vlad, because we already know that by the dargosh, there was something that there's the sheet that they spoke about. They never spoke about that before. And the reason why, just to know that we learned in the Braisa that dargish niskefes is because there was leather, unlike anything. But that's another detail. Problem the Gemara has, let me say it by heart, is when it comes to the making of a keli, only when a keli is called ready to be used is it susceptible to becoming tamei, and therefore the Mishnah in kelim goes through various kelim. When is it considered ready to be used? When it comes to a bed, the Mishnah says that a bed is only considered a bed that could become tamei if you took the skin of a fish and you passed it over the bedposts. And the reason why they would do it is not to give it a shine, but because there were splinters on the wood, and they would need to take this fish skin. If you use the sides of the scales, what's that called in English? What's that thing that we use today? Sanding. That's what they have to sand. Asks the Gemara, why do you have to sand it? If the definition of a mita is something that the bedpost at the end of the day gets fully covered with rope, which means that whatever you will lay on is not going to be placed directly on the posts, but on the rope doesn't have splinters. So it should become a keli even prior. Let's read it. Frankly, what about the name? We learned the Mishnah in Kalim that amita, whether it's a bed, whether it's an arsa, whether it is a crib, when is it considered a keli? When is it b'chlal susceptible to becoming tummy? Only mishi yashufim b'oiradog. Only when you rub them, when you sanded them, right? They used to use the skin of a fish, and all of that is because prior to which, since you have little splinter in the frame, no one is going to use it. You don't want to go to bed and wake up with splinters. Asks the Gemara that in Misariku al Gufa, you justify that the definition of a bed versus the dargish, aside of what type of mattress, is how did they connect the mattress or the ropes to the bed? Mitas dafka, when they went over, they went around it. So the kasha is there's no need to rub it. Now, if people rubbed it, but it's already considered a bona fide keli prior. Answers the Gemara that in the Mita Gufa, the definition stands. When they would have a bedpost, when you have a bedpost and you want to put ropes around it, so you have the more primitive bedposts, which have no area into which there's no grooves for the ropes. There's no grooves. So then you're right. So then when you put the ropes around it, they ended up weaving it so much back and forth, right and left. The frames were covered with rope. No one is going to get a splint. But the fancier people, you know what they did? They made in the bed frame, they made a groove on the top and on the bottom. So when the rope went around it, it went in the groove. So there, what you ended up happening is that you had a piece of rope and still a piece of the frame, a piece of rope and a piece of the frame. And there, if you would not rub it, you would get a splint. That's what the Gemara answers. That and for the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Lazar, this Amoira, that Tiftoid explain the Mishnah and Kalim, the Elaine Arsasa, in those types of Arsa is a bed. That's a good picture, a better picture. From Kesarim, right? From Kesari Yasa, that over there until today, right? It's expensive, right? How much does a house cost over there in Kesar? How do you pronounce it in English? Caesarea. That's expensive. There are Chashuvah people live there. That's a place where to live, right? So I don't know if it's a place where to live. That's where, if you have a lot of money, you can afford a house. There, the East Lahem Nikbin. There, they had grooves. There were fancier people, and those are the beds that the Mishnah is referring to. Weiter says the Gemara. Okay, let's go to the source and let's go to the reason. It's amazing how the Yerushalmi, the source in Scripture is always more important. So first, what's the source? Where do we find that you have to overturn the bed? And I think, David, that's going to be connected to what you mentioned about the oval today sitting close to the ground. So Amar, no, I don't think so. You get also my tama, probably my tama. You bring up a source. I don't think so. My tama in Babli means what's the tam. For Yerushalmi, my tama means what's the source on the Chumash. That's the biggest tam because God said so. It's a whole different mindset. That's what is the Torah. The Torah said that's the tam. If you're starting from darkness, you need a reason. You tell a person God said so. He says, no, I don't want to hear that. I want a reason. So Rab Kirispa, B'Shem Rabbi, this pasuk is in Iyuv, that Iyuv Nebuch, right after the Satan took away all of his 7 sons and his 3 daughters, and he was afflicted with boils. And the types of tzaras that Iyuv have was not to do with his wife. And ultimately his 3 friends, Bildad, Soifad, and Eliphaz, went to visit him. So it says that Vayeshvoi Itoi La'aretz. Parenthetically, today when you go to a mourner, you don't sit on a low stool with them. But they sat with him. Now, normally it should have said Al Ha'aretz, right? If you only push it, sit lower. The fact that it says that they sat with him to the ground, La'aretz, that's the answer of Rabbi Kirispa, the name of Rabbi Yechanan, Al Ha'aretz ain't cause of that. What does it say? Vayeshvoi Itoi La'aretz. That implies Davar Shu Samuch La'aretz. That they didn't sit on the ground. They only sat closer to the ground. How do you get something closer to the ground? Today you call Masaskim, a Machayim, and they bring you a throne that's closer to the ground. The only way they did it then was by overturning the beds. And that made that the rope area upon which the box spring was much closer to the ground, not on the ground, but much closer to the ground. You can't show you Yishainim or Gabe Mites Kfufais. And Yishainim, by the way, doesn't only mean sleeping, it means sitting, it means lying, it means eating. That's the source. That is the source. Now let's go in the words of the Bavli. What's the reason? What's the logic behind it? Let's go milmailo lamata. The higher reason is God said so. Let's go down to this world. So Bar Kapara says that ikudin achas toivi hoyli b'soich beischa. I had a fine image. A human being, every human being was created in the image of God. So a person is God's image that God is telling the mourners, I had my image in your house. Ugiramtani, you caused me to overturn it. In other words, when you bury a person, what happens to the person? His image goes back to earth. There's the overturning of the image of God. Now, you caused me can go to mankind because of the sin of Adam and Chava. Death came into the world. And you caused me mean that when there's a passing in the family, it's an opportunity also to have an introspection, to do tshuva, to inspire ourselves like that. God's image is being overturned. Let me overturn my own image. At af at kfei mitoscha. And Rashi writes that why dafka the bed. So if I remember correctly, he's not quoting it here in the art scroll, but there was something we learned, I think, in Mohit Katan, because that's where man is created, right? People have relations on a bed, right? Tashmish Hamita. I remember something like that in the Bavli. If people can remember more details, that would be great. But turning over the bed is the way we express our taking of responsibility, our responsibility for the fact that someone, those words don't make so much sense to me. I don't think it's less comfortable. It's not less comfortable to lay in a bed if it's closer to the ground. You're laying in the same mattress. It's a certain humbling of oneself. Okay. Now, the is of the Gemara, the mapkin lishna veyichbem, that instead of saying uger mantani lekoifefa, but they actually saying no, that the key is the overturning itself. The act of overturning is what we're looking for, which is what? In other words, there's something that we have to overturn. Who do we have to overturn? Kfei asarsur. Now it's amazing. The word sarsur means a middleman. And the word middleman, says the Charedim, 3 lines under the Gemara, sarsur means Yetzer Hara. Why is he called the middleman? Because he's constantly going between man and God. How is he going between man and God? So he says, he quotes from the Gemara of Bava Basra, that first God sends the Yetzer Hara to us to give us the opportunity to exercise our freedom of choice, to give us the opportunity to express our loyalty to God. But what does he do? He entices us to sin. Then when a person sins, what does the Yetzer Hara do? He becomes the agent that goes to God and tells God, this is what that person did. He's the Yetzer Hara, he's the Satan, he's Mastin. He tells God, look at this person. He made us do it, and then he's the Malach HaMavis. When God takes us away, he comes. So he's called the middleman. So as a way of the overturning of the bed means that we have to start communicating the opposite way through the Yetzer Hara, which is when the Yetzer Hara comes to entice us, we have to understand that he's not enticing us to do this sin. He's enticing us to give us the opportunity to say no, and we say no, and then the Yetzer Hara tells God that your Jew said no to me and yes to you, God. We have to overturn something. Rabbi Yoina v'Rabbi Yosi tarvayim b'shem b'shem and lakish. Chad Omar mepnei mahu yashem emit kfuya. Why do we have to sleep on an overturned bed? Kedei sheyehi noyer balayla v'niska shu avel. If, guys, that's the way the Charedim emphasizes. The first opinion is that if you wake up in the middle of the night and a person is meant during the times of Shiva to be mindful from the fact of the loss that they had, that's the time to be conscious of it. What can happen is that when a person sleeps in the middle of the night, you wake up in the middle of the night, you can forget for a moment that you are in Avedis. But when a person wakes up in the middle of the night and they're sleeping near the ground on an overturned bed, that if they wake up, they should remember that they're enough. We don't want you to forget. We want you to remember that you're enough. The other one says, not that if you wake up, that when you sleep on a low bed, that will make you wake up. Any change of your habit distorts your sleep. You all know that. Most people, when they go to another location, they don't sleep good for the first night. You make a shinui veses, you're off. It's to make you wake up. Not if you wake up, you should remember, since you're going to sleep on a lower bed, on an overturned bed, we want you to wake up in the middle of the night and to remember that you are no. We don't want you to get a good night's sleep. Part of the morning is that you're getting your sleep disturbed, that you are remembering while you're sleeping that you are a novel. All right. Says the Gemara. Said Gemara quoting here Rabbi. Aval calls Manshe Mason with Lafanav. When an Aval has his relative laying in front of him, and as we have from all of the commentators, that what we're learning now is not only regarding the mourner, but it's practical. Who has a corpse in the house? The mourners, the family. So the then is you're not allowed to eat in front of a corpse. Why are you not allowed in front of a corpse? So one of the basic sources is the pasuk that we're not allowed to be lo yeg l'rosh. Lo yeg l'rosh chedef oisei. Lo yeg l'rosh means you cannot mock the poor. Mocking the poor means in this context that he cannot eat, or he cannot make brachas, and we have the opportunity when we eat, or the ultimate. It's not about eating. It's about the elevating of the food. The whole big part of life is the ultimate avodah of bringing God into the lowest part of the world. The mace cannot do that, so don't do it in front of him. So how far do you have to go away? Ideally, turning to the Daf Lamed Gimel Lamed Beis. Go to your fellow's house to eat. What happens if you don't have a chaver, but you have another house? So then oichel l'bayis acher, mamash. The email by now. By the way, bayis doesn't necessarily mean a house. Bayis can mean another room. The houses then were so little. A house meant a room. That was the whole house. Okay, go to another house. Go to another room. The email bayis acher. Not you have another friend with whom you can eat. You don't own another house. You don't even own another room. Okay, so even if you're staying in this room, you have to eat. Make a physical partition. And if you don't have a mechitza, at least turn around. Furthermore, while you're eating, they used to eat on beds. And the aristocratic people, we know this from the Seder, when they would eat in a reclined fashion, right? So when an aval is eating, v'loy mesev, he's not allowed to recline. Another din that people are not familiar with. Guys, by the way, the oinen, this is an oinen. An oinen cannot recline, right? Mesim with the lefanav. Everything is about an oinen. Nor v'loy oichel kol tzarchay. An oinen cannot eat to his full satisfaction. V'loy shoyse kol tzarchay. V'loy oichel basa. The oinen cannot eat the meat, nor can the oinen drink wine. Because especially when it comes to indulgence, it's not just about why are you indulging yourself, but it's also like we learned yesterday, that the reason why the oinen is exempt from all of the mitzvahs is because we want the oinen to be focused on the mission ahead, which is to bury the mace in the most honorable way as soon as possible. And we know it takes time. It takes time. Almost technical. It's almost therapeutic in the way that people are so overwhelmed with the loss. When they get involved in these technical things, it helps many people. At least they're focused. They're not distracted on things not connected to the passing, but they feel like they're doing something. They're getting a document.
Too busy.
They're getting this. They're busy. So don't eat meat and drink wine. And the ein mezamnim alav. So the Rashidilio, let's go with the Rashidilio for this. He cannot join Zimun. Means if you have two people and him, you don't make a Zimun. Why not? We learned that yesterday. Says the Rashidilio, the Patim of Birchas Amos, he doesn't have to bench. If he's not chayiv to bench, he cannot be counted for the Zimun. The Imbeirach, and if he was the one that benched, ein oinen achar v'amei. Why not? Says the Rashidilio, the bracha levatali. He's not allowed to bench. It's called the bracha levatali. Furthermore, even if other people bench and he heard, he doesn't even answer amen. Wow. You're not obligated to bench. Don't be paying attention to Birchas Hamazon. You go deal with the burial. However, continues the Braisa, everything that we mentioned about the oinen and how the oinen is exempt from all the mitzvahs, etc. And he doesn't eat meat, he doesn't drink wine, he doesn't eat his fear, he doesn't get full, he doesn't do hasava. That's only b'chol during the weekday. Aval b'Shabbos, but on Shabbos, none of this applies. Meisa v'oichel. Now, does it mean he has to? Let me say it like this, that he should make an effort. He should make an effort not to behave as a mourner on Shabbos, even though he's an oinen. V'oichel basar v'shoyse yayin. V'oichel kol tzarchei v'shoyse kol tzarchei. He eats full mitzvah Shabbos, and if there's two people and him or more, 9 people and him, so umizamnin alav, he is part of the zimun. The imbeirach, and if he was the one that led the bench, and oinen achrav amen, it's not a bracha levatala. V'chedim sheberchu, yes, oin achreim amen. I'm going to tell you another detail, something that I heard from Rabbi Zajac after the fact by me. We're so exempt from the mitzvahs. You know, you make kiddush, but you don't make havdalah. Now, havdalah normally can be made until Tuesday night. If a person doesn't make havdalah, right? That's the din. Even though they made havdalah and davening, they said they said baruch hamafu, but havdalah you have to make on koshel yayin, and if you didn't make it, then you make it until Tuesday night. In Brazil, when you pass away over Shabbos, Then it was impossible. If you want to be buried in the Holy Land, you got buried Wednesday morning. Because of the types of planes that leave Brazil that can hold a casket, none of them go direct, stop in Europe. So what do you do with Havdalah? I was an Oina. My father passed away Shabbos morning. And I remember that an Oina doesn't make Havdalah. It means on Shabbos itself, you keep on keeping it. So I didn't make Havdalah. That week I didn't make Havdalah at all. Burial was Wednesday morning. That's too late. So what people are told to do is that, listen to this, is that even though we taken Shabbos early, but we never taken the week early. We never taken the week early. An Oinen davens Mincha on Shabbos. Listen to this. Before Plaga Mincha on Shabbos, he davens Maitiv and makes Havdalah without the fire. Before Shkia, after Plaga Mincha, he cannot. No one allows you to break the Shabbos. Keshitas Rabbi Yehuda. There's no such a thing. Shabbos is out by Tzei Sakir Chavim. However, you can make the cheshbon. But just in order for you to be able to make Havdalah, that they allow you to do. So I forgot that they will fire. Of course not. You're not allowed to do. I don't even think you do psalmim. I don't remember those details. Remember this concept of davening mincha early and davening marev early, crazy. And doing Havdalah on Yayin, because on one hand, you're still keeping Shabbos, even though you're saying Havdalah, but you made Havdalah. Because
Rabbi,
that's this price. You don't even answer Amen.
Why not make Havdalah on something less chashuv?
Because Havdalah is a mitzvah, and an oinen is exempt from all mitzvahs. And just to know that even though that midoiraisa oinen is on the day of the passing, but the rabbanan and oinen is until the burial. But no one makes Havdalah on Shabbos. You need some coffee. Omar Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. Oh. Hold on. The Braisa is only speaking about these few things, about eating a meal, about answering Amen, about a Zimon. Really, what we're saying is Chayveu b'shar kol ha-mitzvahs ha-Torah. In other words, what is he talking about? If he's allowed to do these, then he's chayv in all the other mitzvahs. Why would you think otherwise? So really, this is something in the Bavli. The way it's interpreted in the Bavli is that Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel is speaking about Tashma Shamita. And there are those over there who opine that even though Shabbos is a Shabbos and all of the laws of Aninus fall to the side, but they say that just like a novel, Bitsina, we paskin that an Ein Avelus b'Shabbos only b'Faresia, but an Avelus also b'Tashma Shamita and Avelus. What about an Aninus? You would think it's even worse. For sure not. It should be usher. That's what he's speaking about. He's saying no. He's saying there's a mitzvah to have children. So Rav Shimon Gamliel is holding that im chaya oilam is referring to fruit. I'm just telling you that's the shot over here, which is wow. So it's amazing that an oval on Shabbos is asur b'tashma shamita. Okay, the Charedim brings it down. A middle of the narrow line. It's around 20 lines from the top. In other words, I'm reading inside the Charedim. Is noyei. We have to keep on mourning. And wow. And by the way, in Avelus, that's the way it is. Here we're speaking about Aninus. And not only that, Rabbi Yehuda, go back to the Gemara, Rabbi Yehuda Pazi b'Shem Shimon Levi, halacha Rav Shimon Gamliel, which is a big one. Now let's go for it. We gave two reasons why we don't do it today. Right, let's go back. Now, we began today's share by learning the Braisa, Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yeshua, when does Aninus end, when does Avelus begin? Either when the beer goes out to the Chatzar for burial, or let's call it Rabbi Yeshua, we paskin like Rabbi Yeshua, when we close the tombstone, when we put stones. Now the Gemara is going to give you a scenario where Aninus ends much earlier. And we're going to learn Pshat in our Gemara, very important, that we're not speaking about where the burial happens in the city, where the mourners are going to the burial. That's the way we will learn the Sugya, even though there's a machlokes about it. What we're going to be learning now is Dafka, when the burial is happening in another city, and the mourners are not going there. And by the way, that's the way we paskin. We paskin like that. That means that if I remember also in Eretz Yisrael that when people are buried, many people want to be buried in the Holy Land. They just remember from growing up there. So what happens is that after the burial, you make a levaya, You make a levaya and you accompany the car going to the airport. The moment you turn around from that, the mourners have to begin shiva. Even though the other mourners that are going along will begin shiva a day or two later when the burial happens. So that's how we'll learn the whole shot of here. That nimsar l'Rabbi. L'Rabbi means to the Chavra Kaddish. L'Rabbi means to the people that are paid by the community to do whatever needs to be done for the burial. Once that happened, again, let's learn in the case where the burial is happening in another city. And therefore, and it's not just nimsar l'Rabbi. Another detail is that they gave it to the Chavra Kadisha and they turned their face to go home. Means they're no longer in that gathering. Or then Aninus ends. What does it mean Aninus ends? So we began today's share by saying, Aninus ends, you're koifen asamitis. Now we're learning another detail today. And oinen is asur b'basar u'b'yayin. And Aval we'll see soon that God created wine for the Aval. Dafke basar u'yayin. It's a balance. So now oichel basar v'shoyse yayin. And now the Gemara is adding, it's not only if it's given over to the Chavra Kadisha because they are paid by the community. Even if it's not the case, but if nimsar la katofim means people who are what's called pall bearers. In other words, if they're going to another village, they're going to another city, and not the Chavra Kadisha, the Chavedim, they in other words, when other people are took over the corpse, they took over the guf, and they're going to the burial, and you did yours. That's it. You're out. It doesn't matter that they're not paid by the rabbi. Even if they're yechidim, that's the pshat over here. Also, commission nimsar l'Rabbi. And the Charedim is the one that says that's dafka bi'iracheres v'ayin b'fnim. But let's go back. And tefillin we learned in the Yerushalmi that for sure not on the first day, because fakert it makes sense because the after the burial, the day of the burial, which is the first day of the shiva, is called the bitter day. It's the bitterest day in a person's life. Before that, they don't even know what hit them. And that bitter day, pe'er, tefillin is connected to glory. It doesn't go. You're not in a state of glory. Masha'enkein, because of the bitterness, you have to balance it with something. So we're not menachem a person when mason with the lefanav. But after the burial, you have to, let's at least start the sugya of the wine. Let's go. Kad demach. Rabbi Yasa, the mach again is passing on. Not the mace, but the mach. It's beautiful. When Rabbi Yasa passed away, Kabil, Rabbi, now here it says bar va. I know va is written with two vavs, but many say that this va is really a vase. And what do we know? Vase aleph, vase hey, abba. That's how far the language got. And it will fit. You'll see in the next case, we're going to speak about Rabbi bar Abba. It's probably the same one. So Kabil Rabbi bar va aveloi. Rabbi bar Abba was not the mourner, but he received the mourners. And what did he do? Now we're going to go into the sugya of Sudas Havra. The word Havra means a small meal, or the meal that makes them healthier, the meal that you give to mourners right after the burial, which they do not buy from their own pocket, but others have to bring. You don't have to bring food for the whole shiva. That's became a grew a beard. This, but the first meal is brought by others. Va'aichalon basar. Va'ashkis and chamar. No, it's dafka. No, it's already by the Sudas Havra. Part of that was meat and wine. Similarly, that is what Rabbi Chia bar Va did for others. When he passed away, Kad Demach Rabbi bar Abba, it's the same one. So then, Kabel Rab Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak, Rab Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak was the one that made the food for the mourners. He was the one that prepared the Sudas Havra. He received the mourners, and he also, what was the most important part of the Sudas Havra, to balance the mourning with something of luxury, meat and wine. Va'aichalon, basar, vashkis and chamer. However, not everyone ate that by Yesudas Havra. When Rabbi Shmuel bar Yitzchak passed away, and there Rabbi Ze'ero was the one that was makabel his relatives, his children, his spouse, if she was still alive. And what did he give them? Not meat and wine, but va'achaylan till loifchen. He gave them to loifchen ins lentils, and as the Mahara Fulda speaks out, that's the lentils over here. The Rashirilio. He gave them adoshim, not the veloy ka'oisem shel malabas v'yayin. Why says the Rashirilio? Because it's totally b'minig. And some people had a minig that even though an oval is allowed to have meat and wine, not during the Sudas Havra. Not that it's like the wrong time. You have that in the next meal. Lentils, a lentil doesn't have a mouth. a novel is unable to speak, and he doesn't have to speak if he's not in the mood of a lentil is round, whatever goes down is going to go back up. Let's go back. And now the Gemara says there's no machlokes. Oh, that's what the Rashidili is quoting. It's not that meat or wine or lentils. Depends on the minig. Meimar kama duhu minhago. You have to do whatever the minig is. Rabbi Zajac dim midmach pakid vamad. When he was about midmach, when he was about to pass away, pakid means he made a commandment. He told his chevre, he told his family, don't accept sudas avra. Now hold on. The avelim are not allowed to make their own meal from out of pocket right after the burial. Others have to do it. So when he's telling them, don't accept from others, you know what he's telling them? Fast. He says, I want the minhag from me should be that on the day that I pass away, what should you do? Fast. And lemachar, tomorrow, mar zachia, then accept the meal from others. Accept the meal from others, not on the day of Misa. The day of Misa, which should be a day of fasting. That was his family minhag beis harav. Now, let's at least begin. Because now that we mentioned that many people had a minhag, dafka, meat and wine during the Sudas Havra, and oinen is asur b'basar b'yayin, that's a fact. An oval is muter b'basar b'yayin. So says the Gemara, Rabbi Yitzchak berei the Rab Chia. Koi saba. Let's learn, take out the word hava, that which Rabbi Yitzchak described. Rabbi Yitzchak berei the Rebbe was not enough, because or maybe there were many Yitzchaks berei the Rab Chia. So Rabbi Chia, who was the Koi saba, kama mitosei oines, means he was an avil, and oines, a terrible thing happening, and va'olun lagabe Rabban of Rabbi Yudah. So who came to be Menachem Avil right away? He's to Chavedim, Rabban of Rabbi Yudah. And v'havar chamar tov, and they brought good wine, not stam wine, because that was the Mitzudas Havra. According to that meaning was that he come back from the burial, you give him wine. What happens when you drink a lot of wine? The ishtoin sagin, they drank a lot, and the gochachin, and they began to laugh. It was it was not moderate, not in moderation. So lamachar asin boin meil gabe. When these two Mana and Abudan was coming to the second day to be Menachem Avil, so Amaloi Rabbi Yitzchak was upset, and he told them Rabbanan. He began speaking nice. Someone begins speaking nice, you don't know if they're nice or they're coming with a clock. That's how you treat your friends. You're coming because you're my friends. You're my chaver. You know how disrespectful it was yesterday? The only thing we were missing yesterday was we only needed to begin to dance. In other words, you have to have moderation. Yeah, you have wine, but don't over drink the wine. And I just perhaps to suggest the following, that we have in Nichnas Yain Yotzosoy, right? We have the pasuk of Shlomo HaMelech, the Daigabel Lavish Yascheno. And Chazal give three interpretations. The most familiar one, the most famous one is Yisicheno, which means we notice that if a person has anguish, speak it out. In other words, what helps the mourner is him speaking about his feelings of grief. Most people are not comfortable to speak about feelings, or certainly not then. So wine does that. In other words, the purpose of wine is misameach. That I think what the Gemara is trying to says, I don't want the wine that's misameach. I'm not trying to be the simcha. We need to have wine in moderation to loosen me up, for me to be able to externalize and to speak about my grief. So really, the purpose of wine by the mourner in the first day is to drink wine and to cry. And he had too much wine, and therefore he blamed his friends, and to be continued, God willing, in the